Hello, guys. First of all, excuse me because I wasn't preparing for this video. I just have a little bit of time now, and I thought I will give you my thoughts on DAWs and why I'm currently using Pro Tools, which is not something I have ever thought I will say, but here we are. So, just a little bit of history from my end. I started using, well, I don't even remember. It was a cakewalk product when I got into this hobby, and I can't really recall the name of the software. And then I ended up using Logic. That's the point. And I used Logic for many years, and I really liked it. And then one of my good friends recommended me to try Ableton Live, and that was, I think, 12 years ago. And ever since then, I've been using Ableton Live for pretty much everything, including making music, all production, all recording, and mixing, mastering as well. Now, Ableton Live is fantastic. I'm a huge believer in this software, but it has its own limitations. And one of the there are a lot of advantages, and as you can see, one of those, and I'm not gonna dive deep into it. There are a lot of videos on the internet about this, but creating scenes, creating different parts and arrangements is extremely easy. You can switch between these different views. Obviously, the software was initially programmed for live use and DJ use, hence the name Ableton Live. One of the biggest problems I had with Ableton Live was with mixing and mastering. And as you can see on the bottom of the screen, that's where you see all of your plugins. Now, if I'm in this sort of classic track by track view or mixer view, whatever you want to call it, you have to click on the actual track to see all of the plugins that are associated with that track. And that's a huge problem because it's just way easier to look at everything that you have and all of the plugins that you use or any sends and returns. And that's not possible in Ableton Live without sort of hacking it. And and that's a huge problem. Now, there is a huge advantage to Ableton Live, especially for mixing and mastering, that I like, and that's the way that it handles plugins on any particular track. So, for instance, here in the mastering lane, I have let's say, a corrective EQ and some peak limiting with discrete compression. And what I can do is I select these two and I can group them, right? And so there is a logic behind what you do, and if you use these groupings, then it's extremely easy to just turn on and off. I'm recording, and so it created some automation now, but it's extremely easy to just turn on and off different plugin groups rather. So what I can also do is, after corrective plugins, and then I can have some sort of plugins to beef up the sound, to change the characteristics of the sound. So, for instance, the SPL Iron is a very, well, a rather slow compressor compared to an 1176 or even the Shadow Hills. But it's extremely good to maybe use in mid-side mode. There's a tip for you there, to bring up some of the side signal a little bit. And the plugin version has a mix knob as well, which is very cool. So what I can also do is I can, oops, not the game bar, but I want to group these. So now that I grouped these, I can just enable and disable just those, not like all of the plugins on the master lane, but just these ones. And what I can also do is I can just rearrange these two blocks, right? Or I can just put the EQ after the compressor, just like that. See? It's very quick. I can do the whole thing again where I have corrective first. And then I can have the limiter and whatever, clipper. So all in all, it's very user friendly in this sense, and it's very easy to quickly A/B certain things that you do. Now, when it comes to working with multiple tracks, that's when it's becoming a little bit problematic. So now, in the latest version, in 11, you can handle multiple drum tracks, for instance, and I was suffering a lot mixing drum tracks where there you just had one maybe snare and you wanted to keep the phase and move that snare just a little bit. It's a pain in the ass still, even though they provide that functionality to link multiple sort of lanes together or tracks together, and then use sort of elastic audio, but it's very problematic there. So in general, editing audio and mastering, mixing and mastering is not too functional in Ableton Live. So that's where the past couple of months I've spent a lot of time looking into other DAWs like Studio One. Now, Studio One for me was very interesting because it gave me everything that I wanted, which I've just explained, and a lot more. It's like a playground, really. What I felt overall is Studio One is trying to really do everything and even more, give you even more in every aspect, but then it fails on a lot of other grounds. And there are just so many weird things with Studio One that's just not logical. It's like you really feel like it's not really that professional because it's just put together in a weird way. It's like a Frankenstein software. For me, at least, it felt like that. And don't get me wrong, it's an amazing software. But the worst part for me was that it didn't handle my Prism interface, and I like my Prism interface, even though the driver is not the best, and obviously its performance is subpar compared to what you have with RME or the more modern versions like Universal Audio. But I really like this interface, and it was pretty much useless for me at that point, so I had to switch. I used Reaper as well. Reaper for me was very clunky, very clunky. It You can definitely get from A to B with Reaper, but yeah, it's just not for me. It's way too many un not too logical key commands to do certain things. But yeah, that's free. That's a free software, or $60 for a perpetual license, which is amazing. Yeah, for me, that's not cutting it. That software. I tried out Pro Tools because it has a tryout period. I believe 30 days. And I've spent a weekend learning about Pro Tools from Groove 3 tutorials. And I was fascinated after a while. To be honest, it looks very dated. And it was a mess for me at first to look at everything on the interface. But after learning from a proper tutorial, now I understand the reason behind Pro Tools and how they made sure that everything is synergistic. And that's where it really differs from, for instance, Studio One. So what was interesting for me is that, first of all, even the artist series or the artist edition is good enough for most everything. You had like 32 audio channels, 32 everything, buses and whatever. What I really like is now you can customize keyboard shortcuts, and I can just quickly go with the button of my mouse between mixer view and editor view, or however they call this. And it uses folders just like Ableton Live, so it's very familiar at this point for me. And everything that I wanted is here. And so when I look at this mixer view, I see clearly all of the plugins and everything that I've done so far, uh, I can still color code, although yeah, I would have liked a little bit different, like easier ways to color code the tracks, but whatever. And everything, so anything that you do within Pro Tools has a logic behind it, and that's something weirdly that makes sense for me. It's just clicked for me. It's I can't really explain it better. For instance, keyboard shortcuts. I'm not saying that other DAWs don't have a logic behind keyboard shortcuts, but for me it was fantastic to see. And you can watch online these Pro Tools keyboards, right? You can really look all of the keys and how they function, and everything is properly laid out. So, for instance, the numpad. I know exactly how to turn on the metronome with just one button, and then I can set the looping, right. I can start recording with three. I can set markers with enter. So a lot of the similar functionalities are grouped together on the keyboard, and there are global sort of logic behind certain things you do. For instance, if you press Alt, it will be a global. I believe if you press Shift, it will be only the selected tracks. Um, and a lot of these things are fantastic and makes it easy to use and easy to learn really at that point when it really clicks for you how the logic is behind these things. Some of these things that Pro Tools does is a little bit new for me in terms of ways of working. But for instance, let's say memory locations, like you can set certain things with the memory locations. Like obviously you have like chorus, verse, bridge, blah blah blah. You can actually run through the whole song and just press enter, and it creates automatically new markers for you. But what you can also do is set parameters for certain markers. Like for instance, when it gets to verse 2, you want to change the zoom levels. You can do that. So every time you get there, uh, the session will change certain aspects um, of the GUI for you. You can also set pre-record, pre-roll and post-roll flags, which is really, really amazing. And that's a huge time saver. And you can also automate that. So you can say, for instance, you want to record from here, for instance, from verse 2, and you want to sort of punch in but automatically, then you can do that, and you can set a pre-roll, and it will start recording from there. And what you can also do is, let's say you have this part here, and you can set it up so that when you get to verse 2, then automatically the pre-roll, post-roll, and certain parameters of the software will be set for you, so that when you have a large project, you're working in a studio environment, and you have the guitarist behind you, you want to be sort of quick, especially if they are in the mood, in the groove, and they pay per hour. You don't want to waste their time, and it's just amazing that you can set up the project beforehand, so it's easy for them and it's easy for you at the end of the day. So that's really a time saver, and there are a lot of time savers in the software, and a lot of tools and functions that you would normally not use or would have not thought of in a general sense with other softwares. And that's why it initially looked to me as if Pro Tools is extremely complicated, but once you understand the reason behind certain things that it does, then it just clicks. And then you start thinking about recording, arranging, and working in your DAW differently. And that thing for me is fantastic. So really the way you can customize the software is becoming better, as far as I can tell. You can freeze up to certain plugins. So for instance, if I want to freeze up to just the SPL iron and leave everything else, then I can do that. So I can just say commit or freeze up to this insert. It's a little bit different there, but that's something that Ableton doesn't do for you, and that's really a time saver there as well. The way that it looks, the way that it handles tracks, or I can select multiple tracks with ease. That's fantastic. And yeah, the listen bus thing that I can do that easily is amazing, and I can easily bounce certain, mix buses. That's amazing. Like I have the listen bus here, the mix bus, master bus, and I can just select whichever one I want to export. That's fantastic. Or I can just record live if I want to. But to be honest with you, I don't hear a difference. I tried it. And that's the other thing. Like people say, there's no difference between the way DAWs sound, and that's true. But I can tell you up front, if I listen to something in Ableton Live and then bounce it, there's a difference when you listen to the bounced version compared to when you're listening in DAW. Now, if I do the same thing in Pro Tools, there's absolutely zero difference, and I can't explain why. When I'm working in Pro Tools, I listen to my mix. It sounds exactly the same when I bounce it. So I could theoretically record within the DAW, and it would sound the same. The other thing is stability, and I account that for the AAX plugins, so these native plugins to Pro Tools. They sound different. And I wouldn't necessarily say that it's because it's a different format, but definitely if I set certain values in the same plugins in VST, in Ableton, and I set the exact same values in Pro Tools, they are not really the same values for some reason. So they behave differently. Obviously, they are programmed differently as well, but for me and for my ears, I for some reason it looks to me like I can work faster, and it's just more transparent, if that makes sense, because everything I hear in Pro Tools is the same quality as if it was bounced. So yeah, it's weird in a way, but I like it. So those are the things that I really, really like. um Yeah, and when it comes to rearranging plugins, that's weird. The other thing that's weird is you have limited sort of inserts. So it's not like Ableton Live where you can have 45 different plugins on one track. Now you can route one track to another one and then have multiple plugins there. But I mean, it makes you think. And there are, situations. I got this. Like, why are there's something wrong with you, man, if you want to use that many plugins. Well, uh, yeah, in a way, I'm weird, but I want to achieve certain sounds in certain situations, and I don't have everything analog here with me. I have to use multiple plugins in the digital domain to achieve certain results. And sometimes what that means is I might actually use 3 saturators just to get there, just to hear what's in my head, right? And then I lost, a lot of plugin slots. And then I still have to EQ, I still have to use compressors, and oftentimes I'm not using one, but like multiple compressors for different tasks, right? Because like I will use one for peak limiting and then another one for color, what have you. But it's very, very realistic for me to reach 10 plugins for one track. There's no problem. I can do that. And that's when it becomes a little bit of a problem when you want to A/B, let's say, in the middle of this chain, a difference between EQ first or compressor first. That's a pain in the ass there. Again, the other one is the destructive nature of Pro Tools. Certain things are not undoable. Like if I were to remove this channel here, I can't undo that, which makes you wonder why, because it shouldn't be a problem in this day and age. But at the same time, it makes you think twice about how you work and what you do. And most everything else is undoable, by the way. But it really makes you think about how you operate, and that's good in a sense. It's like in the old days, right? you had to calm it. And I think one of the biggest problems with working with DAWs and like tons of options at your fingertips is that it just limits creativity, and there's a commitment issue with producers nowadays for some reason. And it took me some time as well to just say, okay, I'm good with that. You know, it sounds good. It's all right. I can commit to that. That's all right. You can do that. You don't need to overthink. All right. So that's it for Pro Tools. I really, really like it. There's an argument to be made about the pricing aspect for sure. It's not cheap, but as I said, even the artist edition should be enough for producing, even for mixing, pretty much. Because like for most everything, if you don't have like an orchestra, and you can group certain things together, like what I've done with a few projects in Ableton where I had unlimited tracks, still I use the separate project for drums. You can do that. There are workarounds. So the same thing you can do in Pro Tools if you wanna really have like a guitarist who wants to have 64 different channels for the guitars. You can do that, and you don't necessarily have to manage that within the main mixing project. It's probably not a good idea, at least. Well, whatever. For me, it's not a good idea when there are just way too many things going on. I don't like it. But again, you can do folders. You can have folders within folders, so there are options to manage extremely large projects, which is also one of the advantages of Pro Tools, and that you can quickly look at all of your channels on the left side here. That's really something I didn't understand first, but after looking at some of the large projects with more than 100 tracks, it just makes sense to navigate way easier than just scrolling endlessly. And the same thing applies for every clip that's within the project. So on the right side, there's this clips part where you can look at all of the different versions of audio. So let's say you have one audio here that you select, it highlights it, and then you can export that. You can do whatever you want with it. There are also options to clear every audio that's not used within your project to free up space. And then obviously you can just save your whole project, zip it, and send it to someone who's using Pro Tools, which is, as some people say, that's one of the reasons why it's still used within in the professional industry. I wouldn't necessarily agree with that because, I mean, come on, guys, you can export stems or all of your tracks in any audio format, AAF or Wave, uh, and then send it, and it's easy. And there's no fear of, let's say, the mixing engineer and the mastering engineer not having certain plugins that you had. So yeah, I mean that argument for me doesn't make sense too much, but okay. Um, so other than that, it's just like any other DAW, but it's extremely stable. So whereas even with Ableton, I sometimes struggle with this Prism. With Pro Tools, don't ask me why. Like, I don't know why, but for some reason, the performance is top notch. That I have no issues at all. I can run almost, it feels like endless number of plugins live. Like, it's, look at these guys. Like, I have a ton. I have maybe one track frozen, but I have a ton of plugins right now turned on. At the same time, I'm running Ableton Live, so two DAWs are using my interface. I'm recording in one DAW. No problem. I can start another project here. No, it's amazing. I wouldn't be able to do it in any other DAW. And I tried. I told you I tried a few. So right now, I think I'm happy. I can do production work in Ableton Live. It's still superior for me, and there's a reason why Ableton Live is now the industry standard for production. But when it comes to mixing and mastering, right now I'm exporting everything in stems, uh, pulling it into Pro Tools. I've already created my own mixing template that I like to use, and yeah, that's it. And I can work flawlessly within Pro Tools. So that's where I'm at right now. What I can tell you is I like it so much that I already bought the yearly license for Pro Tools. So I'm not gonna change for sure anytime soon. I understand some people bought perpetual licenses, and that's a pain in the back that you have to yeah, you have to pay now quite a lot of money. And yeah, I can't comment on that because I never had Pro Tools before, and I never bought like the full perpetual license thingy. So for me as a newcomer to this software, I don't find it problematic. Yeah, I don't know what would happen if I didn't have internet connection for a longer period of time, but what I would say is I would have bigger problems at that point. Yeah, because I wouldn't be able to work anyway. So, guys, that's it for today. Maybe I will make some other videos about templates and how I use Pro Tools and everything, and my experience in a little bit more detail. I think I already talked quite a lot in this video. But there's just so much when it comes to using different DAWs and the way it makes you think, the way it makes you feel, and um, and it just makes sense to try out different ones to find the ones for you and the one that works for your workflow. So that's it for today. Make sure you click subscribe if you're interested in videos like this, and hit the dislike for sure if you didn't like it, or hit the like if you liked it. And talk to you soon. Bye.